Some evenings carry a strange kind of silence, one that sits on the skin, one that tells you something is happening far above your head, even if you can't see it. On that quiet Sunday night, November 30th, 2025, the people in northern Nigeria looked up at a sky that felt heavier than usual. No alarms, no announcements, no warning from their leaders, just the soft, distant hum of an aircraft they could not identify, a hum that did not belong to Nigeria. And that is where our story begins. Because on this same night, far from the dust and heat of Borno State, a security analyst named Brand Phillip was tracking something extraordinary, a U.S. reconnaissance aircraft circling over Nigerian territory. Not once, not twice, but for the third day in a row. It had taken off from Accra, Ghana, slipped into Nigerian airspace, hovered above ISWAP-controlled territory, and returned without a single statement from Abuja. The Nigerian government had said nothing. The National Security Advisor had said nothing, but the aircraft had spoken for them. This moment forces us to confront a difficult truth. What happens when a nation no longer controls the sky above its own people? What happens when military agreements signed behind closed doors begin to unfold without the knowledge of the very citizens they are meant to protect? And if this is the quiet beginning, what will the loud part look like when election season arrives in 2026? As we walk through tonight's investigation, I want you to stay with me. If you believe that truth should never be hidden from the people, especially when it concerns national security and foreign military operations, this is a conversation you need to hear. And if you've been following the rise of African sovereignty movements from Nigeria's northern crisis to the message of leaders like Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso, then you already know this story is part of something much larger happening across Africa. Please stay with us, and if the truth matters more to you than the headlines, make sure you're subscribed. Long before the rest of the world realized what was happening, ordinary Nigerians in the northern towns were already sensing that something was off. Fishermen along the banks of Lake Chad spoke of a strange sound drifting across the water late at night, too smooth to be a commercial jet, too steady to be a local military helicopter. Mothers in Borno State whispered about a low, constant vibration that made their windows tremble just before dawn. Nobody could see anything, but everyone felt something. What they could not know was that hundreds of miles away in a quiet room, lit only by the glow of tracking software, security analyst Brand Phillip was watching the same phenomenon only from above. Phillip, known internationally for his expertise in tracking aircraft across the Sahel, had detected an unusual pattern. An American ISR aircraft departing from Accra, Ghana, slicing across West African airspace and circling repeatedly over northeastern Nigeria. It was not a one-time anomaly. This was a pattern, a mission, a deliberate operation, and it was happening without a single public statement from the Nigerian government. For 3 nights in a row, Phillip documented the same aircraft tracing the same loops over territory controlled by ISWAP. His findings were posted on X, and almost immediately several independent reporters cross-checked his coordinates and confirmed that the aircraft's flight path matched known routes used for reconnaissance missions. The revelation spread quickly among security circles, but still not a word from Abuja. This silence was even more troubling when placed alongside another fact just days earlier. A secret agreement between Nigeria's National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu and the United States had been quietly revealed. The public never saw the document. Ribadu never explained its contents. But those who had access to pieces of the deal knew it involved 3 classified files, 3 sets of conditions signed behind closed doors away from the eyes of the Nigerian people. These files, according to the original source, granted the United States permission to conduct surveillance operations, deploy unarmed UAVs, and gather intelligence on terrorist activity. It sounded straightforward on the surface. Help us fight terrorism, but the details were hidden, and when details are hidden, motives are often buried with them. Complicating matters further, politicians like Femi Fani-Kayode were publicly criticizing Washington, making fiery statements about American interference, while completely ignoring the fact that their own national security establishment had already opened the door to U.S. military activity. Their public outrage felt hollow, more performance than principle. How do you shout "America cannot come" when American aircraft are already circling above your territory? The sense of contradiction grew stronger as more information came to light. Brand Phillip's data showed that the aircraft used Accra as a launch point, avoiding Nigeria's major radar corridors and limiting the chance of domestic detection. This suggested two things. First, the operation was intentional and coordinated. Second, Nigeria's top officials were fully aware of the mission and had chosen not to inform the public. What made this even more unsettling was the timing. Nigeria is approaching a pivotal election year in 2026, a moment when political tensions run high and alliances shift quickly. The agreement with the United States, if used selectively, could become a powerful tool. Intelligence gathered today could become political ammunition tomorrow. Names could be released, lists of terror sponsors could emerge, and arrests could be framed not as justice but as strategy. For the ordinary people beneath those silent night flights, none of this complexity was visible. They heard only the faint hum above their rooftops. They saw only dust swirling in the moonlight as the aircraft passed. But far from their villages, on screens and in secured files, a very different story was unfolding, one that would reshape Nigeria's political landscape and redefine the meaning of sovereignty in the months ahead. In many towns across Borno, people had become used to fear of night raids, fear of sudden gunfire, fear of disappearing roads swallowed by conflict. But in recent weeks, a new kind of fear began creeping in. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It didn't wear a face. It came quietly from above. People started asking the same question in hushed voices. Why are these planes flying when the military says nothing is happening? Mothers looked at the sky with unease. Men returning from evening prayers noticed the faint circle patterns the aircraft traced like a silent warning written in the clouds. As these feelings of uncertainty spread on the ground, something far more explosive was taking shape beyond the reach of ordinary citizens. The aircraft Philip tracked were not only conducting reconnaissance, they were marking the beginning of what insiders described as a coming political earthquake. According to the confidential source who first revealed the secret deal, America was preparing to release a list names of individuals linked to terrorism financing. But it wouldn't be a full list. It wouldn't be transparent. It would be selective. And in a country heading into the intense heat of the 2026 elections, a list like that is not just information, it's a weapon. The tension rose sharply when analysts warned that certain figures inside Nigeria's political class were already pushing Washington to target their enemies under the guise of counterterrorism. The speaker in the original transcript made it clear the danger was not America's involvement alone, but how Nigeria's elites might abuse it. In his words, they might pressure America to take those people out. They might even arrest them. These weren't abstract fears, they were grounded in history. Nigeria has seen political cases dressed up as national security many times before, but never with American intelligence and drone surveillance behind them. As people in the north wondered about strange aircraft in the night, politicians in Abuja were scrambling behind closed doors. Some were terrified that their own names would appear on the list of terror sponsors. This fear wasn't unfounded. Former Nigerian intelligence officials had already gone on national television admitting that terrorism was being funded from within the country's political structure. Governors, senators, high-level officials, the very people sworn to protect the nation. The emotional peak of the crisis came when a video resurfaced of a former Zamfara governor openly stating that the dream of every Muslim in Nigeria was to turn the country into a Sharia state. In a deeply multi-religious country, statements like this struck the public like a lightning bolt. People began to wonder whether extremism wasn't just hiding in forests and safe houses, but sitting in government offices. Even more troubling was the revelation that a clause in Nigeria's constitution prevents state assemblies from amending Sharia law. While ordinary citizens had never considered this detail, significant extremist groups understood its power. They had used it as cover for years, and now, with U.S. aircraft tracing circles over their territory, their entire network risked exposure. Internationally, reactions began to form, though quietly. Analysts in Washington, Paris, and London monitored the developments closely. To the world, Nigeria wasn't just another country fighting an insurgency, it was the economic anchor of West Africa. A destabilized Nigeria is not a regional problem. It is a global one. Then came the moment that pushed the crisis from simmering to boiling. The revelation that the United States had already conducted unmanned reconnaissance from Ghana for 3 consecutive days confirmed what many feared. This was not theory. This was not speculation. This was an operation, and it was escalating. For many Nigerians, especially those in the north, the feeling was immediate. If this is just the beginning, what comes next? For the ruling class, the panic was different, whose name will come out first. But for international observers, especially in the United States, the question struck deeper. What happens when counterterrorism becomes the sharpest political tool in Africa's most populous nation? The answer, as we will see, carries consequences far beyond the borders of Nigeria. In small northern villages, Kukawa Munguno Baga life has long been defined by caution. People look over their shoulders on empty roads. They listen for footsteps in the dark. But now a different kind of uncertainty has taken hold. When men gather under neem trees to drink tea, they speak in quiet tones about what they've heard. The aircraft aren't ours. Women washing clothes by the river glance upward, nervously wondering whether surveillance lights can see them. Even the children sense the tension, asking why the sky hums at night when the Nigerian Air Force insists everything is normal. For ordinary Nigerians, the greatest consequence of this secret arrangement is not the drone itself. It is the feeling of being kept in the dark by their own government. People have learned to live with hardship, but secrecy creates a wound that is harder to heal. When a nation's leadership signs an agreement that allows a foreign power to operate freely in its airspace, and citizens only discover this through leaked tweets from an analyst abroad, trust fractures. And once trust breaks, it rarely returns. This fracture extends into Nigeria's political class, where fear is spreading like a slow-moving fire. Politicians who once spoke confidently about national sovereignty now whisper behind closed doors, terrified that their names or the names of their allies might appear on America's forthcoming list of terror sponsors. Some know they have nothing to fear. Others know exactly why they are afraid. The uncertainty is turning the ruling elite against each other. Alliances once based on convenience are beginning to crumble under the pressure of suspicion. Meanwhile, in Abuja, the silence from official channels has become its own form of political statement. By refusing to address the public, the government has inadvertently confirmed what many already suspect: the secret deal is real, and the extent of American involvement may be far greater than anyone imagined. For a country that prides itself on independence, this raises deeply emotional questions. Has Nigeria traded sovereignty for security? Or worse, has it traded transparency for political convenience? These political tremors are not limited to high offices. They are beginning to reshape community dynamics across the north. Moderate Muslim leaders express concern that U.S. intelligence may mistake them for extremists simply because they share religious spaces with people under suspicion. Christian communities fear retaliation from militant groups who believe they are being targeted unfairly. Ordinary people do not know where the line is drawn or who drew it. Adding to the anxiety is the knowledge that many terror networks have been funded from within Nigeria's own political and economic system. When former intelligence officials publicly admit that governors, senators, and businessmen have paid militants to secure influence or destabilize rivals, it deepens the sense of betrayal. Citizens now wonder whether foreign drones are the only reason some officials fear the sky. As these tensions build, broader consequences emerge. International partners begin questioning Nigeria's reliability. Investors quietly delay projects. Regional allies, Chad, Cameroon, Niger, worry about spillover effects. And within the African continent, the contrast grows sharper between Nigeria's opacity and the push for sovereignty seen in countries like Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traore. The most profound impact, however, is psychological. Nations do not collapse when they face threats. They collapse when their people lose faith in the institutions meant to protect them. If Nigerians believe their government is hiding essential truths, election season may become far more volatile than the conflicts drones were sent to monitor. And as the aircraft continue their silent circuits across the night sky, one question rises louder than the hum above the rooftops. If this is what we know today, what is still being hidden? From Washington's perspective, Nigeria's silent sky is not merely a domestic issue, it is a strategic crossroads. In classified rooms inside the Pentagon, analysts have long warned that the Sahel is shifting. Terror networks are expanding, state authority is thinning, and entire regions risk slipping beyond the control of elected governments. Nigeria, with its massive population and economic weight, is the anchor that keeps West Africa from spiraling into deeper instability. When that anchor begins to wobble, Washington takes notice. Inside American intelligence circles, the flights over Borno are viewed not as interference, but as preemptive necessity. The United States does not forget the abduction cases, the American citizens seized by Boko Haram, or the dramatic midnight rescue operation conducted years ago when U.S. Special Forces flew in and out of Nigeria without a single casualty. For American security planners, that event was not just a mission, it was evidence of how fragile the Nigerian security architecture truly is, and it reinforced something they quietly believe: if Nigeria can't stabilize itself, someone else eventually will. Yet, within the United States, there is a division in worldview, one that traces a political fault line between Democrats and Republicans. Under Obama and Biden, foreign policy toward Africa leaned heavily on drone activity, intelligence operations, and partnerships that quietly expanded U.S. presence on the continent. Critics argue that this approach destabilized countries like Libya and created security vacuums exploited by extremists across the Sahel. Supporters counter that terrorism required proactive measures even when local governments struggled. In contrast, the Trump doctrine takes a different tone. While still firm, it positions Washington as a reluctant enforcer, more willing to negotiate, more eager to pull out of endless wars, yet uncompromising once a line has been crossed. Trump's supporters claim that his administration pursues peace through deterrence rather than intervention. His detractors argue that his unpredictability can create risks of its own. But one thing is clear: under Trump, American actions in Nigeria will not be hidden for long. When pressure builds, it becomes visible. Meanwhile, across Europe, the tone is muted but anxious. France, still recovering from being expelled from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, watches closely. European analysts know that if the United States deepens its operational footprint in Nigeria, it may reshape the entire balance of influence in West Africa, especially now that Sahel nations are leaning towards sovereignty models championed by leaders like Ibrahim Traore. The European Union does not want to lose the region entirely, not to instability and not to geopolitical competitors. In Moscow and Beijing, observers view the unfolding events with quiet calculation. Russia sees Nigeria as a potential opening for military partnerships, especially as Sahel nations align with its security model. China, on the other hand, worries about economic fallout. Nigeria is a major node in its Belt and Road investments. A destabilized Nigeria threatens infrastructure, trade, and mineral access. But perhaps the most revealing perspective comes from African observers outside Nigeria. From Ghana to Kenya, from South Africa to Burkina Faso, leaders are asking a shared question: if America can operate inside Nigeria without public permission, what does that mean for the rest of us? The world is not simply watching Nigerian airspace. It is watching how a powerful nation exercises influence over Africa's most populous country, quietly, surgically, and without a single statement to the people living beneath the humming sky. As the nights grow quieter across northern Nigeria, the same question rises again and again among ordinary families who gather outside after sunset. If these flights continue, what are they preparing for? No alarms sound. No statements are given, yet the air itself feels tighter, as though the sky is holding its breath. People sense that something larger than their villages, larger than their struggles, is already in motion. And they are right. Because what is happening above Nigeria today is not simply reconnaissance. It is the early stage of a political reshuffling that will erupt long before ballots are cast in 2026. The secret agreements, the undisclosed permissions, the quiet cooperation between Abuja and Washington. These things do not remain quiet forever. Sooner or later, the consequences fall. They fall on the powerful, yes, but they fall hardest on the people who never had a say. The warning signs are already here. Foreign aircraft circling without public permission. Politicians whispering behind closed doors. Analysts predicting selective arrests disguised as counterterrorism. Fear rising on all sides. Fear of exposure, fear of retaliation, fear of truth. And when fear drives politics, history has shown us that nations do not simply enter periods of tension. They enter storms. But this moment is not only about Nigeria. It is part of a much larger question facing the African continent, one that echoes from Accra to Addis Ababa, from Abuja to Ouagadougou. Across Africa, nations are choosing between two futures: a future shaped by foreign influence and hidden deals, or a future shaped by sovereignty, transparency, and leaders who speak plainly, as we have seen in places like Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traore. The contrast is growing clearer by the day, and the world is watching. For American viewers, especially those who follow Africa news closely, this moment deserves your attention. Not because it is dramatic, not because it involves drones or secret documents, but because it reveals how deeply global politics can shape the lives of ordinary people, people who may never know the agreements signed over their heads until the consequences arrive at their doorsteps. So let me leave you with one final question. Do you believe these secret military arrangements will truly make Nigeria safer, or will they create a new chapter of uncertainty, one written in silence above the clouds beyond the reach of the citizens who deserve to know the truth? If you feel you are among the first to understand what is unfolding behind Nigeria's closed doors, please share this message. And if you believe that truth is always more important than headlines, make sure you subscribe before you go.